Okay, let's make some geometric shapes, things like squares, rectangles, triangles, diamonds. So all of your shapes are not going to have perfect edges. None of them are, even the curved shapes. You will have a woven or zigzag texture to them because even though I drew this out as a perfect square, because we're putting yarn in and out and in and out, and because the yarns are going to eventually join each other, it's called joining the wefts, you're going to have something of a little bit of a zigzag going on. When you look at two of my shapes that are up here, you can see what I mean. This is obviously an orange rectangle, but here you can see that the yellow is kind of creeping in on it, so it's going to have a zigzagged or a woven look to it. You guys just have to be okay with it, but it still ends up looking like this is still a rectangle. It just kind of has like a bumpy texture to it. Same thing up here. This is a triangle, but you can see areas where the yellow has been woven into it. That's because we're still making a fabric, so we're going to have a textile look to it. This completed one by a student from a few years ago did a marvelous job making sort of like a checkerboard geometric pattern, but you can see their salmon colored thread goes into their teal threads. They're actually sharing a warp string, and that's what you guys are going to be doing too. So just kind of be aware of that as you are working on creating your shape. So let's start with something really easy. Let's start with a square. So I'm going to make my square 6 strings big. So that means I'm just going to go across 6, back 6, across 6, back 6. So I like to start because this is over. So I'm going to consider that to be under. So I'm going to go over, under, over, under, over. Now, you'll notice that I'm just kind of putting my finger on this. That is so I can remember that that is the string I need to go on. I'm going over that string. But look, it also looks like I'm going over all these strings. This is what I have. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Even Miss Brown has to check herself. This string is my end string. So just like when we did the pink, 1 and 22 were our ends, now I have to remember that 6 is my end string. So just like we did when we were ending rows over here, I'm going to end the row the same way. I'm over right now, so now I need to go under and go back in the opposite direction. So now as we're kind of working our way into creating our designs, our end strings are actually inside of our loom. They're all kind of going to be like all over really. So I'm going to continue weaving, and this is kind of like an eyeball thing. I'm going to weave, a square is even on all sides, so I'm going to do 6 strings, and it's not going to be by 6 strings, because you guys can see this is what 8 looks like. This is not 8, warp strings big, so I'm going to keep going with my square until I hit how much I think is a square, and I just like do that by kind of rotating my fingers. So when it's like about right there, I'm going to stop. Ta-da! I am finished. So just like we've ended rows before, I'm going to cut a little bit of my string. Also go ahead and clear my needle off. And then I'm going to make sure that I pull that end underneath the string and make my X and pull the tail through so I'm making an actual knot on my warp string. Pull tight, cut close, and now I've made an amazing square. So a rectangle is the exact same way, except your rectangle is going to be longer than it is tall or taller than it is wide, whichever direction. Some people like to build rectangles that go up. Some people like to build rectangles that go sideways. So I'm not going to show you that because I think that you guys can figure it out, especially since you already made one rectangle that goes all the way across. So let's move on to triangles. I'm going to demonstrate how to do a triangle just in the middle, and I'm also going to demonstrate how to do a triangle off from the side. I think from the side is a little bit easier, and in the middle is a little bit harder. Please remember that your triangles, just like your squares, are going to have that little bit of a pixelation happening. They are not going to be wonderfully perfect triangles. So I'm going to get my new string, and I'm going to start exactly the same way. You guys know the drill by now.
Measure your thread, attach to your needle, and attach to your warp.
So when you're doing a triangle that looks like this, that's just kind of in the middle, you need to make sure that you have an odd number of strings. A triangle kind of has to be on a center point, and then it's got to go however many strings the same to the left as the right. So 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So then altogether it's actually taking up 9 strings because 4 to this side and 4 to this side plus the 1 in the center. So every time that you're weaving, and if you want to make a triangle that looks like this, you're going to do like 2 rows of the longest one. So 2 rows of 9. Then you've got to bump it down and you've got to do 2 rows of 7. Then you got to do 2 rows of 5, 2 rows of 3, and 2 rows of 1. So each time you're dropping 1 string from each side. And then the triangle is gradually getting taller, but it's also getting smaller and coming to a point. If you only do 1 row, it's going to be very shallow. So sometimes people like to do 2 to 3 rows, so then that way their triangle can get bigger. If you want your triangle to be taller like this, something like that, then you would need to make sure that you do quite a few rows, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, of 7, then of 5, then of 3, then of 1. I'm going to build my triangle right here. That'll be my first string. And I'm going to do a triangle that has 9. So this is my first string.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
So this is where I want to end up. I recommend building these shapes with plain weave. I think that if you get into any other type of weavings, it's going to be hard to track your strings. You can always do the fill-in and big bars with the different weaving types, but if you're building very specific shapes, I would stick with plain weave. We were under with the pink, so I'm going to say that's over, under, over, under. I think I'm going to do 3 rows of 9 because I don't like the way that 2 strings looks. I want it to look a little bit thicker as we move up. So on this last row, this will be my 3rd row. So I know this is getting kind of confusing. So I did 2 full rows of 9. On my 3rd row, I'm going to drop a string. So what I mean by that is instead of going to the 9th string, I'm going to go right here. And I'm going to drop a string from this side too when I go back. So it'll be 2 full rows of 9 strings and then a partial row. And then it'll be 2 full rows of 7, then a partial row. 2 full rows of 5, etc., etc., etc. So it's a lot to keep track of. That's why this was more on the medium side. Over, under, over, under. So I'm going to stop here. This is going to be my ending string. And then when I go back, instead of ending on this string, I'm going to end on this string. So that is my first full row of only 7 strings. And now I'm going to go back and do my 2nd row of only 7 strings. Now, since I've done 2 rows of 7 strings, now I'm going to go, and I'm not going to go to my 7th string, I'm going to drop a string. And since I dropped a string on this side, I need to drop a string on this side. And now we're going to go down to 3. Eek! So we're on 5 right now. We've done 2 full rows on 5. Now I'm going to drop down to 3. So instead of going to this string, I'm stopping here. And it gets very small very fast now. And then we're just going to now just wrap around it. Like so. I'm going to do that twice. Like I said, you have to be okay. This is definitely a triangle, as you can see, but it's not the most perfect triangle, even though in math it is perfect. But just like our square, it has woven edges. And then when we fill this in later, it'll still look like a triangle. It'll just kind of have those bumpy edges. So when you're ready to finish off your triangle, go underneath your warp string, make an X, and then pull your tail through. Very carefully place your knot. So see how that's like sticking out? Just kind of pick up your warp string and turn that knot to the back. All right, there is a triangle. We're going to do a triangle from the side. And the reason that a triangle from the side is a little bit easier is because you don't have to like drop a string from both sides. You're only dropping a string or adding a string on one side. And it just kind of, sometimes I think it looks a little bit cleaner than this particular triangle. So I make my triangle, let's just go to this same string. So I'm just going to kind of eyeball. I'm probably going to have quite a few rows of it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap this around one time just so we have a nice point. I'm basically working at the bottom of the triangle, and I've got to increase in size until I get to that string. I'm actually going to make another knot just so I make sure that I have a nice looking triangle bottom here. There we go. So I'm going to move out, and I'm going to go under to my next one. And I'm going to go over under. So now I've done my first row that has 2 warp strings. So I'm going to do, just like I did down here, I'm going to do like 2 full rows. And then when I get to the 3rd row, I'm going to go over. So again, that'll be like a partial new row. So I just went under, I'm going to go over, under. And that's my 2nd real row of 2 strings. So here we were dropping strings, now we're adding strings. Woof! Way to get complicated, right? Okay, so now I'm going to go back. Eek. Make sure I'm kind of forming this as I go. I'm going to do it one more time. Also, you can kind of adjust this to like how it's looking. Like I didn't want to go add another string when I didn't really think it looked quite good yet. So I think I actually have 3 rows, and then I'm going to add a string. So it just kind of depends on your string. This string seems a little weak and a little bit smaller, so I'm just using my judgment here. So now I'm going to pick up my 3rd warp string. So I'm going to continue to always use my pattern of over, under, over. And now I've picked up that 3rd string, so it has become part of my weaving. And it's starting to look like triangular. So a little trick you can do too, like on my last row here to make it look a little bit better, is I can take my weaving needle and I can, boop, boop, just kind of pull one of those extra strings over to be in the blank space that Mrs. Cantrell and I warned you not to do. And that'll kind of let it be more of an illusion of a triangle. So I'm going to do one, I've done two, so I'm going to go further. I'm going to pick up my 4th string this time then. I've done 2 full rows of 4, now I'm going to go to my 5th string. And just every time I get 2 rows of my additional string, I'm going to keep going until I hit here. Woohoo! Look at that beautiful triangle! I'm also like loving the negative space that I made here that I can fill in. So now I'm going to make the other half of my triangle. And this is also what you do with a diamond. I guess you could consider this like a half of a diamond. So I'm going to go back, and now that I've gone all the way to my string here, I'm going to start to let every 2 rows, I'm going to let go of a string as I work my way back to make this very symmetrical. I'm still following the over-under pattern, but every time I'm just dropping a string at the same time I dropped a string on the other one, which is, look, if you see every 2 rows, except down here when we were kind of building up our triangle a little bit. And when I feel like I've done a good job, it's symmetrical, I can even push and manipulate the strings down so that it, is the same. I'm just going to, again, thread my needle through, make my X, and then pull my string through to make a knot on the warp. So, diamonds are 2 triangles that are put together, right? So when you have your board, what you would do is you would build a triangle, starting with 1, moving your way to 3, moving your way to 5, and then you would build the top of the triangle. So when you got to 5, you would do a few more rows, then you would do 3, then you would do 1. So it's just putting 2 triangles together. So I'm not going to show you that because I just showed you how to do that. So it's basically the ideas that were made in here, how we dropped a string here, and how we added strings here. So just imagine starting a triangle. You can even, if it's easier, you can start where it's 5, and you can build like the bottom half of your triangle and then build the top. You don't have to do it in one continuous motion. And just like the triangle, it would need to be on odd numbered strings. So you can't make a diamond out of 8 strings because you need it to lay on that center string and then additional strings to the side. So those are your geometric shapes.